All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Toby Fabule, and I currently work as a sustainability analyst in Chicago in Adrian Smith Gordon Gill Architecture.
And my name is Maria Kanakis. I'm currently a design strategist at Chicago Design Network, also here in Chicago. And today we will be talking to you about our common future, who is sustainability for. This is kind of a combination of interests and research into different fields and how they reference sustainability, but generally how the world's largest corporations benefit from investing in sustainable design practices. To Toby and my own background, while many architecture and design firms are quick to claim their involvement in carbon zero challenges or various green certifications, our interest in this presentation and what we'll be talking to you today is reflecting more future sustainable practices and what that entails specifically.
In this session, we'll deliver a brief synopsis of the role of architects and their importance in fighting climate change and challenges across varying scales of corporate social responsibility. While Maria and I are both trained as professional architects and have a joint background in sustainability analysis and strategy, both of us will share our thoughts on how our studies at Harvard GSD, Master of Design Studies in Ecology, allowed us to refocus our skills and apply it to assist in the larger climate challenge.
And so the organization of the presentation is broken into these three categories: notes on sustainability, which is corresponding with the light green dot, cultures and geographies is the middle green dot, and then an index of ideas is blue.
So speaking on the theme of sustainability in different contexts, I am originally from Nigeria and I have lived across the various countries and also lived in different cities as well, which definitely made me see sustainability in a different light as well. And then coming to the GSD kind of like shaped my experience in like how I tackled the big sustainability question.
And even within those different contexts, similar to myself, every border defines sustainability differently. And so this has been an interest of Toby's and mine since we met at GSD, and we've continued to study this. And so on this image, you'll see basically the use of sustainability throughout printed and digital texts over time. It really started to take off in the 60s and 70s, and you can see it's arrived to how we use it today, which is pretty common. Yeah, Toby.
Since the growth of the cities, mass production and pollution have intertwined the effects of sustainability. For example, in 1962, the publication of Silent Spring by Rachel Carson raised awareness on the perils of pollution and the importance of sustainability in a manner that transcended disciplinary boundaries.
And other publications like Stuart Brand's Whole Earth Catalog also started to fuel the spread of this term. A lot of printed media and books and publications of the 70s and 80s started to proliferate the term sustainability, making it basically as commonly used as it is today. Even developing other movements outside of publications or literature, such as the first Earth Day in 1970.
And then following that same Earth Day in 1972, sustainability as a term was first used in the magazine. The Ecologist published an essay called A Blueprint for Survival. A few months later, also in that same year, the first UN conference was held on human environment. This started a new period of environmental awareness, both socially and politically.
And this is how we arrive also at the title of our talk on our common future, because of our many other interests in sustainability and architecture. Our interest is who is sustainability for. And so the Brundtland Commission, formerly the World Commission on Environment and Development, was basically a sub-organization that the UN aimed to unite countries in pursuit of sustainable development, one of the terms that they outlined. And so within this report, these are just scans of the hearing and report itself. Policymakers started to identify who sustainability was for. Are they for individuals, volunteer organizations, businesses, institutes, governments, or so on? And so I'll read this one quote quickly. The Commission has focused its attention on the areas of population, food security, the loss of species and genetic resources, energy, industry, and human settlements, realizing that all of these are connected and cannot be treated in isolation from one another.
These ideas, very many, are essential to equivalent the intergenerational equity needs are basic and essential. economic growth will facilitate their fulfillment and equity is encouraged by citizen participation. Also most notably said by Brundtland was the distinction between environment plus development. The environment is where we live and the development is what we all do in attempting to improve our lot within that above. Those two are inseparable, especially now in the face of climate change. Brundtland also identified the three pillars of sustainability as economic growth, environmental protection, and social equity, which are very notable as we go on.
And so this slide is more of a visual bibliography of all of the concepts Toby and I are presenting today, basically situating between low-tech and high-tech solutions to sustainability, and then a collection of reports and guidelines to design solutions. And so obviously there's hundreds, probably thousands of other books that you can situate within this diagram, but these are just a few that we think reference our talk and some of the other talks within Climate Week.
For sure. And since we're in the age of AI and everyone is using ChatGPT, well, mostly everyone, asking ChatGPT a question of like, who is sustainability for? And the idea of like, it spits out the definition of like, it's for everyone, regardless of age, nationality, or background, about meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future, which is mostly a lot of historical cultures. When you look at what their thesis is on, that's what it's about. But notably, that hasn't been the case so far in terms of looking at the debates between the global north and global south, how those are defined, how the global north becomes synonymous with economic development and industrialization, and the south represents the previously colonized countries that require help in the form of international aid and agendas. And that brings about the different terminologies like climate colonialism and climate apartheid, where the colonialism refers to the exploitation of resources by the power of the global north countries when dealing with climate change and environmental policies. So we're seeing more things like climate migrations, climate refugees all around the nation and like different parts of the different countries as well. Then we have apartheid, which is the disparity of how climate change affects the wealthy and not wealthy people in countries. Like if we take an example of Chicago, looking at the heat stress index of where things are, then if you overlay that with a map of a tree map, you can see where those heat stress indexes are, like depending on the borrower, whether it's wealthy or not wealthy, low or middle income individuals and communities have at least contributed to these man-made climate change and are most affected in the consequential natural catastrophes. And then putting that in the terms of social sustainability, human sustainability, economic and environmental sustainability, thinking about how these terms start to like play a part in how we define the different pillars of sustainability and also how the discrepancies are there.
And so this slide starts to speak to basically what Toby was talking about, the targets of those, but also who the outcome of these design processes affects first and foremost. Individuals. This could be the person doing the action itself, such as architects, landscape architects, ESG manners, a series of different corporate social responsibility roles popping up in different companies, or they're different forms of renewable energy technicians or environmental educators. Communities is obviously more scalable, so these are lead homes, these can be spatial neighborhoods, local environmental councils, green building consultants, and so on. And populations are tend to typically transcend different geographic boundaries. So these could be larger organizations such as LEAD, WELL, International Development Specialists, climate change scientists, UNESCO, and so on.
And then further breaking that down into high technology, medium technology, and low technology. And and then thinking of like how different types of technology or like what sustainability is defined under the technology umbrella starts to look like for different communities and different places as well.
And you'll have people on both ends of the spectrum saying technology in a way got us into this mess. Technology can also be our salvation. And then you'll have people on the other end saying low tech is just as feasible of a solution. This is a quote taken from a book called Low Tech, which we referenced in the bibliography a few pages back, where this practice of architects basically revisits older methods of sustainability. They say, extending the grounds of typical design, our focus is designing a movement that investigates lesser known technologies, traditional ecological knowledge, TEC in tech, indigenous cultural practices, and mythologies passed down as songs or stories. So it's really a combination of these different perspectives of sustainability that can't be found in scientific textbooks.
There has been a 20-fold increase in the number of global climate change laws since 1997, according to the most comprehensive database of relevant policy and legislation. So these different maps start to show the different how climate change is being mapped out, how sustainability is being thought about in different countries and different parts of the world, and who gets the say in that.
Yeah, and then basically all of these tell the story that we're saying in different ways. And so this map shows, based on different data sources, top climate risks across the globe projected for 2040. So sea level rises, other climate indexes. You can go to the next one. And then this starts to show a different rigid boundary of finance taxonomies for each of those areas. So what are other incentives for investing in sustainable infrastructure, or quite literally, what areas need investments?
I was going to say, this one starts to talk about the number of climate laws and policies, and especially this year alone, there's been a lot of new laws and a lot of definitions of how things are being defined. Like, for example, net zero is being defined as high efficiency energy building and different like aspects of things. But like looking at the climate laws and policies where governments are really digging into how they define what these look like for them and like how it benefits them as well.
Mm-hmm. And just to give you another idea of that footprint, in 2019, the top 10% of global emitters, about 700 million individuals, were responsible for almost half of global CO2 emissions. And while the bottom 50% of individuals are responsible for almost 12% of emissions. So it's not necessarily pretty equal in terms of impact based on population alone. Yeah.
And then we start to get into like what kind of sustainability certifications we have per country, whether or not the country is sustainable, but in terms of how sustainability is defined, that country is not sustainable based on different projects and LEED certification and like access to these kinds of certifications and different things as well. And another quote from 1987 was talking about how different societies have different conceptualizations of sustainability, as well as requirements for sustainability based on varying cultural expectations and environmental constraints. And while that may be desirable, it may not yet be realistic to expect that every social, economic, or biological system will be sustainable. Even in the broadest sense, global sustainability may imply sustainability of some portion of at least the entire planet, which is what we're seeing today. And this was a quote from 1987, which is very interesting to think about in this context.
And so on this slide, we compiled basically a cross-section of different practices, institutions, and events that start to cluster all of these ideas that we've talked about together. Each of them have basically taken in their own initiative or way to redefine who sustainability is for, or use sustainability as a tool for reaching people that didn't necessarily have access to it before. And so each of them are worth checking out. This is also a personal project of Toby's and mine that we're building up over time.
I just want to thank people for watching. I know we can't see all the audience because everyone's on YouTube. But thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. This is a very ongoing project that we would love to develop further and think more about accessibility and the discrepancies in sustainability.
Mm-hmm. And I think overall, I was even listening to some of the other talks throughout the week. It's really interesting to see how different fields are combining different perspectives of sustainability. And just because something might exist in one context doesn't mean you can't borrow it from business or law and copy it into design practice, for example.
For sure.
All right, with that, we'll let you go. Thank you.
Thank you.